Salut French students, bienvenue au vidéo 2 du chapitre 5. We're going to be talking about le week-end dernier. Weekend, of course, is an easy word to recognize, right? Dernier means last. So we're going to be moving from talking about things in the present time to talking about events that happened in the past. And we'll look at some forms of this new verb tense here in these first few slides, and then I'll talk to you about how to form those verbs. So first we'll kind of talk about the meaning and what they look like, but then you'll actually learn how to put them together. Okay, so let's start with the first sentence we see right here. Alice Perez, femme d'affaires américaine. Une femme d'affaires, c'est un businesswoman. So she's a businesswoman, an American businesswoman. Une femme d'affaires américaine travaillant à Paris. You may or may not recognize this ending on the verb travailler. When you see the en ending on an ER verb like that, it's basically the equivalent to an ing verb in English. So she's an American businesswoman working, travaillant à Paris. Elle parle de ses activités de samedi dernier. She's talking about her activities from last Saturday. Et vous? Okay, so what about you? Okay, some questions here that will now introduce us to a verb tense we call le passé composé. Okay, so I'm just throwing that out there for now. We'll break it down a little bit more later on. Okay, où est-ce que vous êtes allé? Qu'est-ce que vous avez fait? So, où, where? Est-ce que, remember, this is an expression that basically turns anything into a question in French. So, où est-ce que vous êtes allé? So, where did you go? Qu'est-ce que vous avez fait? What did you do? So, you might notice some verbs you've seen before, like the verb aller. That would be the infinitive of that verb. Fait comes from the verb faire, to do, to make or to do. So we're using some kind of different forms of those verbs. A little bit later on, I'll break down for you how we get to that point. Okay, so samedi matin, Saturday morning. Now, Alice is going to talk about what she did on Saturday morning. Okay, je ne suis pas sortie. So, je suis would be I am, right? But we're combining that now with another verb, which comes from sortir, which is like to go out. Je ne suis pas sortie. Ne and pas, you know, turns a verb into a negative form. So, I did not go out. Notice that the verb has two parts. Suis, sorti. And in French, when you form this particular past tense, le passé composé, you're going to be using two parts, okay? And we'll break it down a little bit further as we go on. But for now, just recognize that we're using two parts. Je suis resté chez moi. So you might recognize the verb here, rester, to stay. Oh, I stayed at home, chez moi. J'ai dormi jusqu'à 10 heures. So dormi is coming from dormir, to sleep. J'ai dormi jusqu'à 10 heures. I slept until 10 o'clock. Good for her. Okay. J'ai pris mon petit déjeuner. Okay, pris is going to come from, and I'll just move that up here. Is going to come from the verb prendre, to take in this case, or to have, it could be in some cases. Okay, j'ai pris mon petit déjeuner. I had my breakfast. Okay, so all of these verbs, you know, I can put these even here in a different color to make them stand out. Ooh, that should be IR. Okay, dormir. So all of these verbs that I have highlighted in blue here are what we call infinitive forms of the verb. They're not conjugated yet. In English, the infinitive is to plus verb, to go out, to stay, to sleep, to take, to have. That's the form of our verb in English that has not been conjugated. So I can say I go out, you go out, and we go out, they go out. But when it's not conjugated, we simply say to go out. So in French, in this case, it's an IR verb. Sortir means to go out, but once I start to conjugate it, its form is going to change. All right, so let's keep on looking to see what's going on with Alice. Okay, so samedi après-midi. So she's moving on with her day, right? Et je suis allée en ville. So aller, of course, you're going to notice, is coming from the infinitive aller, to go. Je n'ai pas travaillé. She could say j'ai travaillé, I worked. In this case, she's saying it in the negative. So she means I did not work. Travailler. Et j'ai retrouvé un ami au café. Et retrouver means to meet, kind of intentionally, like they set up a meeting. So we can say here, this belongs to the infinitive retrouver. So, j'ai retrouvé un ami au café. I met a friend at a cafe. Okay, and moving on to samedi soir. Je suis sortie. No, I went out. So we saw that verb earlier for the morning. J'ai dîné avec une amie et j'ai bien mangé. So dîner, we can put both of those verbs here. Okay, and the other one would be manger. So dîner, manger. So I had dinner with a friend and I ate well. Notice the adverb bien. In English, it would be well. We would put that after the verb. You would say, I ate well. In French, the word order is a little bit different. The adverb goes in between the two parts of the verb. J'ai bien mangé. It's like saying, I well ate. You know, it's a little different. Et j'ai vu un film étranger. So vu is going to be coming from the infinitive voir, to see. Après le film, je suis rentrée chez moi. So this one is coming from the verb rentrer, like to come back. So after the movie, she came back to her house. J'ai lu le journal. And lu is going to come from the infinitive lire, to read. So I read the newspaper. Et finalement, je n'ai rien fait. And of course, we saw before that fait is going to come from the infinitive faire, to make or to do. Rien means nothing. And so the word order in French would basically be like saying, I nothing did. In English, we would say, I did nothing, right? So the word order is just a little bit different there once again. Okay, so the purpose of these first three slides is really just to introduce to you these verb forms, the passé composé, to get you kind of familiar with it, to just see how it's used in different situations, to talk about past actions at different times of the day. All right, now we can actually look at the forms of this verb. So, le passé composé avec avoir. So when we say what happened in the past, one verb tense you can use is the passé composé. There are other past verb tenses in French that you will learn later on. This is the first one. Okay, it has two parts, and those two parts are called the auxiliary, that's always such a hard word to say, auxiliary verb. You can also call it a helping verb, so I'll put that there too. That's a little easier to say and remember. So the auxiliary verb and the helping verb and the past participle. Okay, an auxiliary verb or helping verb is the first part of the passé composé. We have the same kind of verb in English, and I'll show you an example of that at the bottom of this slide very soon. Okay, it's usually avoir in most French verbs, and it's conjugated just like you see in the chart below. So, j'ai tu as, il a, elle a, on a. Nous avons, vous avez, ils, elles ont. So remember, just to review all those different forms of avoir. You need the verb avoir to be able to form most passé composé verbs. And it's the same in English. I have a couple of examples I included down here. We might have a verb like I have spoken, and to form that verb, I need a helping verb like have, and I need a past participle spoken. So whenever we form verbs with that tense, in English we call that tense the present perfect. We also have a simple past in English, so we have two separate tenses where French just has one for the same meaning, and that's common. Lots of languages break things down that way. So I have spoken. The rough equivalent to that in French is j'ai parlé. So I have spoken. It's really just like that. Je is like I, et is like our have, parler is like spoken. The same with j'ai dormi, I have slept. Je ai dormi. So it's really put together in a very similar way to our English verbs. So and then I think that comparison kind of helps make it a little bit easier to understand. And all it means is simply I slept, I have slept, I did sleep, or I spoke, I have spoken, or I did speak. That's pretty much the equivalent of the passé composé to what it means in English. It can mean several different things. So basically the thing to know is that any of the verbs conjugated with avoir in the passé composé have a form of avoir plus the past participle. Okay, the past participle of all ER verbs ends in E, and that of most IR verbs ends in I. So if you have a verb like parler in the infinitive, I'm gonna just try to type that in here. So if I have parler, okay, that's my infinitive. To make my past participle, I basically take this off, take off the ending, and put the accented E on the end. If I have another ER verb, like manger, I'm going to take off my ER ending and add the accented E. J'ai mangé, I ate, or I have eaten. Maybe another one would be étudier, study. Take off the ER ending, add your past participle ending. J'ai étudié, I have studied. Okay, and IR verbs work in pretty much a similar way, a similar pattern, but you add an I to the end instead. So dormir becomes j'ai dormi. And the only other example of an IR verb I can think of at this moment is conjugated a little bit differently than the example we see here. So we'll hold off on other examples. Okay, moving on to the next slide. You see also when it comes to past participles that there are some irregular ones, and we have lots of irregular verb forms in English too. We just don't think about them that much because if it's your native language, you've been doing it your whole life, and that's just how it is. So we have verbs like go that become went, or what would be another good one? Think that becomes thought. So not all of our verbs are regular either. So a lot of past participles are irregular and you just have to memorize them. So avoir becomes j'ai eu, tu as eu. Il y a eu. Boire becomes bu. Courir becomes couru. Lire, as we saw in a previous slide, when Alice read the newspaper, Elle a lu le journal. J'ai lu, tu as lu. Voir becomes vu. Être becomes était. Faire, fait. We saw that in one or two examples. Écrire becomes écrit. Prendre, pris. And then other verbs that are similar to prendre, like apprendre, comprendre. J'ai appris, j'ai compris. So again, it's formed with the helping verb avoir, conjugated according to the pronoun you're using, and then you add this past participle form to it. All right, and to wrap this up, le passé composé avec avoir we're sometimes going to use adverbs to describe how frequently somebody did something in the past, how they did it, like the quality of what they did. So we might need to use some words like toujours, souvent. We might talk about, as I said, how well somebody does something, bien, mal, like good or bad. And they're usually placed between the two parts of the passé composé. So between avoir and the past participle. And so to put a verb in the negative form, you're going to put ne directly after the subject, put pas, jamais, or rien just after the auxiliary verb. So I could say j'ai travaillé hier matin. I worked yesterday morning. And if I want to say I worked a lot, I would say j'ai beaucoup travaillé hier matin. So it's literally like saying I a lot worked yesterday morning. In English, it would sound a little bit unusual to our ears, right? Because we would place a lot somewhere else. I worked yesterday morning, or I worked a lot yesterday morning would be the most logical place to put that in English. But the word order is different in French in this case. So to sound grammatical in French, we need to put it between the two parts of the verb. Okay, if you're using a word like jamais or rien, après je n'ai rien fait. Rien is a negative word already, so you wouldn't do this, for example. You're not going to add pas in this case because, let me just highlight it and cross it out. It doesn't belong there because rien is already a negative word. So it would be like creating a double negative. Kind of like in English saying, I did not nothing do, or something like that. You don't need both words. The same thing with jamais. Let's see if it's gonna let me type it in there. Come on. All right. So, hey, je n'ai jamais fait. I never did it. Something like that. So with certain words after the auxiliary verb, you don't need to have pas there. So je n'ai rien fait. And I can uncross that out now. Okay. All right, so the passé composé, as I mentioned a little earlier, can be translated in a variety of ways in English. So if I say, j'ai pris le bus, I took the bus, that's the first meaning that comes to my mind. But it can also mean I have taken the bus, and there we see a helping verb, auxiliary verb, like have, and taken, a past participle. So taken is a past participle in English. I did take the bus. Okay, in English, we use this form to kind of emphasize something. So I took the bus, like I did take the bus. You might be trying to convince somebody that you actually did do it. So all of those forms are equivalent in French to j'ai pris le bus. You will learn later on that there's another verb tense called the imparfait. You're not going to learn about it just yet. When that one comes up, it will be the equivalent of other kinds of past actions. So for now, just know that the passé composé means these things. Also coming up a little bit later, we'll be learning about le passé composé avec être. So there are other ways to form the passé composé with être as a helping verb. So that will be coming up later. But for now, we'll just focus on avoir. Okay, so this time I didn't include any interactive parts to this video just because this is a brand new tense, a brand new form. For many of you, you may not have seen it before. And I wanted to just introduce you to the form, get you familiar with it, and then as we go forward, I'll give you some chances to actually say what you did or didn't do in the past. Okay, so I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to our next video with le passé composé avec être.